I'm so glad to be back. I've had an interesting week last week. I went to Mexico to do some business. I started a corporation that bought vacation rental properties when I met and married my narcissistic ex. And I was going down there to deal with some business that we had to do to kind of make the business different, smaller, get rid of a couple properties. I had to meet with an attorney and make some corporation changes. But in that process, I stayed at the condo that he and I had built and then lived 6 to 7 months of our life together. And this was the section that started about, for those of you who read the book Love You More, it was about the phase when we're a good maybe 10 months into the marriage. We were about 10 months into the marriage. I knew he'd been cheating, quote unquote, he was getting help and doing better. I thought we were both in therapy. He was in his own therapy. I was in my therapy. We were doing a lot of seemingly hard work to get better. But actually what I found out after the fact, when I was writing the book, I found out that the so-called appearance of getting help was actually a deception. It was just a very elaborate gaslighting effort. So here I am staying at the condo with my adult sons, and normally when I stay there, I've stayed there a couple times this year. Normally when I stay there, I stay in another bedroom. I stay in the guest bedroom, but the housekeeping had set it up to where I was going to stay in the master bedroom where he and I had spent our marriage at. And because I have to have bedding in a certain way, and I would have had to remade bed, and we're tired, and it's just too tough. So I didn't change the situation. I just went ahead and stayed in the master bedroom. It was awful. It was awful. I was constantly being triggered. I would look at the shower and think of the times I spent crying in the shower. I would look at the bathroom sink and think about where he kept the missing Viagra. I would look at the wall that got knocked out and how he'd joke about me being scared of me when I was actually feeling very, very scared of him. I thought about when I was in the bed, the nights that I'd slept alone while he was gone, stonewalling me. I was awful. It was awful. And I hadn't had that kind of experience, being triggered and reliving it in years, since where marriage has been over almost 3 years old. It's been over almost 3 years. So it got me thinking about triggers and trauma and how a lot of us get stuck in trauma. In what happens? Why does this happen? What we can do about it? How can we move on? Because I know what's happening to me is happening to a lot of us. There's nothing unique about my situation, unfortunately, because I hear from all of you. I hear about how you're still trying to heal and move on. And especially if we come into the holiday season where family gets together and there's all sorts of expectations that we have that we put on ourselves or society puts on us or our family puts on us. And so I really want to slow down and talk about what happens with trauma and why we get triggered and talk about some suggestions of what we can do to begin to heal. So let me stop and introduce myself. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. This is awesome. I'm both live on Instagram as well as TikTok. So thank you for both groups so much. And Instagram, I have to say, you guys have been so freaking amazing. My account has just blown up over there. And I'm very, very thankful for all of you, for the interactions I have with you, for getting to know you. So thank you so much for your involvement on Instagram. I appreciate it deeply. I look forward to getting to know you better. So I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience, and I'm a narcissistic abuse survivor. And I was abused as a kid, but I became a narcissistic abuse survivor after all this counseling experience and being an active psychologist. And you would think that that my knowledge of dangerous people and toxic relationships and all of that would have prevented and saved me from the pain. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's very hard to spot toxicity when you haven't been learned to look for it and don't know the signs of it, because they mimic and parrot and mirror us very, very well. And they create a response in us that's very attractive, and intoxicating, and actually it's mesmerizing. It's literally the word, I'm using a literal word, mesmerizing. It's hypnotic. When you meet them, they use tactics that are hypnotic, and it's very hard, very compelling, very hard to resist. So let's talk about trauma and talk about triggers and how to, because you're coming into a time where you may be triggered a lot with this holiday season. Let's talk about how to protect yourself better. So I want to first talk about what is trauma. How does trauma happen? And because triggers happen because of trauma. There would be no triggers if there weren't any trauma. So our bodies are made primarily to survive. Our mind's goal is your survival. It isn't, interestingly enough, not to have a happy life. It's not necessarily to be richly around other people. It's about helping you get through the day and continue to survive and live. That's its primary objective. It's preoccupied with the most basic things first. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you having enough to eat? Are you warm today? All of these issues are the things that your mind is primarily initially concerned with. And one of them is danger. Are you in physical danger, or are you in psychological, emotional danger? And it's constantly scanning for those. And any experience you've had before of danger, it's particularly alert because it recognizes that as being bad, and it watches for it happening again. So if you've had a near miss on the highway, it's going to be very aware of people crowding your lane, or maybe tailgating, or someone's tailgating you. You're going to be very alert to that because you don't want to be injured again. You don't want to be hit again. So it's also aware that you need certain things psychologically to be safe, that you need to be respected. You want to be championed as a person. You want to have your autonomy respected, to be able to pursue things in your best interest, explore, and be yourself. And so it's also scanning the environment for that. And when you get traumatized, and for those of us who've been in a toxic relationship, the whole experience is very traumatizing. When you discover that you've married somebody, or you get into a relationship with somebody, you find out that it's been deceptive, that there is an ulterior motive, that you are not being really seen and appreciated for the individual that you are. That's a betrayal, a deep betrayal, and it causes a wound and an injury to you, and it's traumatizing because you are hurt, you are diminished or damaged or impacted in some way. Maybe your financial freedom's been hurt. Maybe your sense of self-esteem has been injured. Maybe your sense of safety, in the sense of you thought that this relationship was certain things. It brought in certain kind of commitments and promises, and you found out that it didn't. And so those things are very, very damaging. So when that happens, the mind, because it's very about survival, it goes into a mode of protection. It literally ramps up to do one of four activities. It's going to you're getting ready to fight, you're getting ready to flee. You will also get ready to fawn in order to sort of placate the situation and make it smooth it over, or you will freeze in a response like a bunny does. So you'll do one of those responses as a way to protect yourself from danger. And when that happens, it's interesting. They've actually looked at functional MRIs, which kind of looks at the perfusion of blood activity, of brain activity. Certain parts of the brain gets very active, other parts of the brain get very shut down, very quiet. And one of the things that happens is our ability to make meaning and process, ability to feel feelings, all of that goes offline. It's because it's into survival. Literally, you're focusing on how to make it through the moment. So everything that's not critical to survival goes offline. You don't need those things. But what happens, though, is that means there's not good memory consolidation. You're not processing. You're not having an ability to have an emotional reaction. You're not making sense of what happened, and you're not being able to really attend to yourself because you're just literally trying to survive this horrific moment. Now, the super damaging part about emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse, psychological abuse, is that we live in these situations for long periods of time. This isn't like a near miss on the highway where it happens and then it goes away and the crisis is over. Or it isn't even like, unfortunately, as much as I dare compare it to an airplane crash. You survive the crash, you walk away, and then you try to make sense of what happened and how it affected your life. This is an ongoing situation where you're chronically put in the position of feeling at threat. So you get stuck in this hyper alert condition of looking for safety and danger. And as a result of that, you stay in this very high alert position that actually is for yourself is toxic. We're not meant to live with high levels of cortisol and adrenaline. We're not meant to be in this state of preparedness for emergency. It's meant for a very brief time, but unfortunately, because of the endurance of these types of situations, we get stuck in it in a very long-term basis. So what happens is you just kind of like shut down parts of who you are, parts of the way you should be living life. In other words, for example, you're not feeling, you're not being able to be present in the moment and enjoying the moment. You're focused on survival, and that really inhibits you being you, but also you experiencing life. So it's then normal then why sleep becomes an issue, because when you're in high alert, you're not going to sleep, right? I mean, that's very natural because you're trying to like stay awake and make sure nothing bad happens. You're also going to be scanning the environment. You're going to be looking for future threats. So you become very vigilant, very edgy, and very jumpy. You're probably going to have some digestive issues because when you're in a high alert state, the digestive system shuts down. And so now you may be having GI issues or other kinds of, complications with that. You may find that you have now problems with blood pressure or your heart rate's a little too fast. You become dysregulated because it becomes stuck in this high alert state. So another weird thing that happens in this process is that memory, because memory is now gone offline, it's not processing right, it's not like storing correctly, these moments get stored in their raw form, unprocessed. So when you get back into something that's like I did with staying at that condo, get into a moment that sort of reawakens the memory of it, they come flooding back as if the trauma is happening now again. It literally is, because here's the weird part. The way all of this is happening, it's not stored in time. It's stored outside of time. So when you're reliving it or being triggered, you actually are experiencing it as if it's happening now. And that's why you're so flooded, so having so many issues. Isn't that wild how that happens like that? And it's no wonder then why we feel so undone by it. Now, normally, here's the other really weird thing. Normally, when you're in a bad situation, like say, let's go back to the highway, you go into a bad situation, you know that as soon as the person gets around you or goes away, then the event is over. But unfortunately, in this situation, because it's a flashback and it's a trigger, and it's not rooted in time, you don't have a sense of, oh, this is going to go away because this is happening now, and I know what's going to happen next, and it will be done. Instead, it feels like it isn't ending. And so then you become afraid about the fact that you are going to experience these triggers at any unexpected moment. You become afraid of triggers because it's so taxing, so upsetting. So you start to try to manage not having more triggers, which then becomes even worse because now you're feeling like you're battling your own self. You're battling your mind, you're battling self. So how do we begin to heal when we are these types of experiences? How do we get over this? And by the way, I see a little bit of the drama going on in TikTok. Would you just block them? I mean, this kind of questioning is unnecessary and it's deliberately antagonistic, and we just don't need this today. So, yeah, sorry about that, Instagram. We had a troll come on and it's just creating a little havoc over there. We're being very nice with them. We don't need to be so nice. So how do we heal? How do we heal when when this is happening? So this is what I did. One of the things I did was I said to myself, hey, I have not been in this room and I hadn't had to face these memories before, but this is a memory of the past. So I placed it in time for myself. I reminded myself that I'm no longer in this relationship. I have no contact with this person. I don't need to be afraid because this is over. I reminded myself that this is over. And that's really helpful because remember I said the triggers and reliving is not placed in a timeline. So you feel like you're back under threat and you're being helpless and something awful's happening. So just with the reminder of yourself, saying to yourself, I'm safe. This was bad. I didn't like this. This was really, I didn't deserve this. I think even validating the pain to yourself. I didn't deserve this. This is really bad. But it's over and it's no longer happening. Because one of the things about trauma that makes trauma so traumatizing, don't you love that? Trauma so traumatizing, is our helplessness. We don't like feeling helpless like that. And when we're feeling triggered, we feel helpless again. So we want to be able to take our control back around the helplessness. We're not helpless. We're actually really not helpless. It may feel that way, but it's usually because of the reliving of the experience that happened when we were really helpless that we somehow then accidentally think we're helpless now, and we're not helpless. It's interesting. We just did a poll on TikTok, and I would love to hear what you think, Instagram. We asked, how do you experience triggers? Because with PTSD, some of us actually relive it. We actually have some form of like flashbacks. But others of us do some form of depersonalization or dissociation. We numb out, or we become disconnected with ourselves or disconnected with reality. So I would be curious, Instagram, do you find that which do you do? Are you having flashbacks where you feel like you're reliving it? Or do you tend to do more of the numbing dissociation piece of it? For myself, I typically am more of I numb out. I tend to get very blank, and by the way, I was listening to Vessel van der Kolk's book, Body Keeps the Score today, and I'm familiar with his work. I mean, how can I not be as a psychologist? I've actually got to hear him speak. Fascinating guy, soft voice. He has a very soft voice. But one thing he said that was a fascinating reminder is that when you dissociate and numb out, you're actually going into, that's a psychological picture of freezing. You actually in that moment are freezing. Your brain's freezing. You probably physically get very still. Things go offline. You literally kind of check out of yourself. Isn't that interesting? And that's a state of freeze. You're actually freezing. Yeah, that's how I do. I typically numb out as well. I've had a lot of experiences where I was really helpless, and so the only control I had was not to just be here mentally, just to kind of leave. So yeah, that's what I do too. But it helps to recognize when you're feeling these emotional experiences for you to say, I'm no longer in trouble. I'm safe. This is not happening now. This happened in the past, and I'm safe. I think the other thing that's really helpful, and this is one of the things I did, was I start to feel helpless again. Maybe I feel helpless around having triggers and being reliving or flashbacks or whatever, or maybe even the numbing out. I feel like my body's being taken over for me. But I remind myself that that's actually not true. I have options. I can process it by talking to myself. I can use deep breathing techniques and sort of reset myself physiologically. See, there's two ways that we can respond to it. We can respond to it from what's called a top-down or a bottom-up. So let me explain what that means. A top-down response is where your intellect, your cognition, your thinking comes in and talks about it and processes it so that it then helps calm things down emotionally, which is your midsection. If you think of the brain, the core part of the brain, the oldest part of the brain stem that regulates temperature, emotions, it's the fight or flight, everything is from this core, which is way back in the back of your head near your spinal cords, right there. And it's very important. It's the oldest part, and it's what we have in common with every living thing. We have like I said, regulates all your autonomic system. And then the midbrain is called the mammalian brain, and it's what we share with higher level mammals who take care of their young. That's the part of the brain that handles emotions and memories, and those types of issues. And then the top part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. That's the youngest part of the brain, and that's where we think about the world and how we interact with our world and our sense of self in the world. So there's two reactions that we can take when we help with triggers. One is we can take a top down, which is to use the prefrontal cortex and talk back to the part of the self that's, becoming dysregulated in the fight or flight mode. Or we can re-regulate, reset. It's called bottom up, where you move in and help from the more worked up, over aroused part of you, and then respond out of that, and then let it kind of sink forward. So a top level response would be to, like I said, set it in time, remind yourself this is not happening this moment, maybe journaling about it. It might be where you want to do some art therapy, maybe you want to talk to a friend, maybe get some counseling. Those types of things are very kind of top-down responses. A bottom-up response would be things like doing deep breathing, maybe doing some kind of go out and take a walk, where you actually kind of reset yourself physically. Maybe you go splash water on your face and you get a blanket, like a weighted blanket, and you sit under it, and you do things that sort of help you at a sensory level re-regulate yourself. There's a great app, and I don't know if you can get it anymore. I tried to recently download it and I had problems, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it anyway. It's called, and it's a weird name. I don't know why they named it. It's called Daily Skill Diary. It's written for DBT, which is dialectic behavioral therapy, which helps people who have dysregulated experiences, and it was particularly designed by Marsha Linehan, not the app, but I'm saying DBT. Marsha Linehan wanted to help people who are struggling with the personality disorders of dysregulation be able to sort of soothe and comfort themselves. And so it gives you techniques and suggestions how to handle it kind of at a sensory level, but also how to handle it kind of in an emotional level. And it's a really great app to sort of give you some techniques about how to do that. So those are some ideas. One of the other things I did, and I'm a sexual assault survivor, so for me, my sense of my body and space is hard because I feel very protective of it. So I want to keep myself close and tight. I probably overly tense, muscularly overly tense. So one of the things I've been doing is doing yoga. They found yoga is terribly helpful with a sense of yourself in space, and then protecting yourself, learning to be comfortable with yourself in very uncomfortable positions, sort of take your sense of self in space back and own it. I also have been getting massages, and that's been very helpful for me too. The app, Laura, is called Daily Skill Diary or something. I have it in my mental health resource link. So if you go to the link in my bio at the very bottom, I have a list called mental health resources. Is in that list is where I provide a link to it. I have no affiliate with it, no connection to it. And like I said, I recently tried to download it myself and found it kind of hard. So yoga is very helpful. So you want to look for things that are mind-body connections of sense of self and your body in space are very, very helpful. People talk about like tapping or those types of things where they, touch themselves. So one of the things I did was when I was in that condo feeling all stirred up, I actually reached out and touched the wall. I know it sounds really weird. Like, why would you do that? Well, because I was rooting myself back in my body, that I was here in that place and this was a real wall, and I was touching the wall, and it helped me. It really helped me sort of at a sensory level get back connected to myself and connected to myself in space, in time, in this place. But here's another thing. So I'm going to say one more piece, and then I'm going to turn it over to talk to you about what you're doing and how you're doing with all of this. As I got away from the condo, I asked myself this. This is really important. This is one of these hard questions to sort of like process for ourselves. So if you're finding you're having a lot of triggers, and I know some of you guys talk to me and I have a sense of your life. If you're finding yourself constantly worked up, it may be a sign that you are still in a state of helplessness, that you are still acting out some piece of the trauma without actually meaning to. Okay, so let me give you my example. I'm a really responsible person. I don't like to make rash decisions. I like to make them very careful. I tend to do too much for people, and I tend to take on way too much. I tend to minimize my needs and see myself as an essential part of the picture. I'm not very good at that. So Why am I keeping the condo? Well, it's a hassle to sell a property in Mexico, honestly. It's a big hassle. And I'm a resident of Mexico, which means I'd need to find something else to state that I live there, that I have a home there. So that means I have to find it. So that's a hassle. And I have to then go change it with immigration. So it means I have to go down there and pay an attorney or pay somebody to file paperwork with them. It's a hassle. You can hear it's a hassle. But still, if it's bothering me, if I'm going to find myself overly worked up every single time I go, why am I keeping it? I'm not helpless. I'm not in this relationship anymore. There is no need for me to have a connection with this person anymore. And for me to act as if I don't have options, I didn't have options in the relationship, except to get out of the relationship. I couldn't make somebody be a better partner and be careful of me. I couldn't do that. But I have options today. I'm not the same person anymore. And one of them is I don't need to keep this property. Maybe I buy something else down there. Or there's probably other workarounds. I'm probably not the only U.S. citizen who has this issue. So I'm sure there's other solutions to this. So I realized that my mindset was contributing to my anxiety. It was contributing to my triggers. And I need to sort of get up out of the fact that mindset of just surviving. I just need to survive this. No, I don't. I don't need to survive this. I can reappraise the wisdom of this decision and make better decisions for myself because I'm not helpless anymore. I'm not trapped in this situation anymore. So that's how I did this. So that gives you some ideas about how to work around traumas and triggers. So I'm going to turn it over to you now. So we can talk about whatever you like, both on Instagram and TikTok, and put your thumbs up in front of your comment or question to me so that I know that you're talking to me, not talking to each other. And thank you so much for being here. And if you're not following me, please make sure that you follow. And I always love to know what kind of content you want to see me putting out. And before I completely turn it over to you, did you get your tickets to the Lundy Bancroft webinar? Because 2 more weeks, the price is going up. You guys want to not miss this one. This is going to be an amazing webinar with Lundy Bancroft. If any of you have ever been in a relationship with an angry or controlling man, you know how confusing it is and how thrown off and how it doesn't make sense and how much responsibility we as women take for the relationship, how much we take responsibility for this. So please come so that you can get closure, make sense, understand where is it coming from, understand the impact to your children, understand what your options are and how to know when it's too much. I mean, like one of the questions I had, and I know it's kind of maybe a weird question, maybe I'm not the only one who's ever asked it. I want to know, is it normal that all men are angry? And how much anger should I put up with? Believe it or not, you'd think I would know that, but I actually, because I was used to it. It's kind of normal to me. So it was really, really helpful for me to read through Lundy Bancroft's 9 profiles of abuse and for me to realize, it's okay to get upset. We all get upset, and anger is a fair way of expressing being upset. But when it's manipulative and deceptive and intimidating, that's something completely different. Where you can find it's a link in my bio. It's like about the 3rd link down. Just go to the link in the bio. It's called How Could He Do That? That's the name of it. The Truth About Abusive Men and Their Relationships. That's the rest of the title. So yeah, please check it out. And by the way, not all men deal with anger with explosions. Sometimes anger can be passive. It could be withholding and checked out and avoiding. So I know some of you who says, hey, mine never gets explosive, but it doesn't mean he's not angry. It doesn't mean he's not being controlling. We can control each other just as much through silence and intimidation and withholding as we can through aggression and anger. Yes, I see someone says over here, my wife is the abuser, not in our relationship. No, you're welcome to be on my page. I'm just this webinar specifically is about men. It isn't true about all the stuff that I put out, just about this webinar. So I'm very happy that you're here and that you're on my page because we talk about abuse from both perspectives. And I try to be very fair about that I know that there are a lot of men being abused by women. In fact, many of you talk to me. You text me on the side and talk to me about what's been happening. Yeah, see, Glenn's been struggling as well. So please, I have narcissists who are on this page too and talk to me about how they want to get better and what does that look like. So this is a equal opportunity for everyone. So Brittany asked, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, is I have subscribers, and I have a premium private group of support for anybody who's interested. You become a subscriber either on TikTok, Instagram, or through Coffee. It's like Patreon. It's $5 a month, and you have access to me over on Facebook, where we all hang out. And then once a month, we do this big video chat where we talk about whatever you want to talk about. And the next time we're doing that video chat is December 28th. So yeah, let's see, Scott, you've been abused too. Yeah, it happens on both sides, very much so. Yeah, very much so. Interestingly enough, for those of you who watched my page, my grandmother was a psychopath, so she was very abusive. So I was abused by women as well, very much so. So my experience has been by both genders, not by one, by both, very much. So Brittany brought up a good question. Oh, and Whitney, I see your question. I will get back to you in a second. I'm going to ask Brittany's over here on Instagram. I'm sorry, on TikTok. So what are we struggling with? Most of us are struggling with breaking a trauma bond and how to heal afterwards. Yeah, I appreciate knowing that. Thank you so much. So yeah, if you want to be asked, so back to my group. If you want to join that group, I just saw someone do it. That's why I'm saying it. So if you join the group and become a subscriber, either through Instagram or TikTok or through Coffee, which is a link in my bio, for $5 a month, then you get invited to a Facebook group. Once that happens, let me know. I'll try to reach out to you. If you don't, I will reach out to you and then give you the link to join to the Facebook group. And then that way you can have access, like I said, to chat with me, chat with other survivors, other people who are, trying to heal. And then also we have a monthly group meeting where we hang out and talk and encourage each other. So if that's something you think would be really, really helpful, please become a subscriber. I would love to meet you and get to know better. But Brittany asked about rumination and triggers. So I want to go back to her question. How does OCD play? What role does it play with rumination and triggers around leaving a narcissistic relationship? And this is a great question because I have seen the connection. Now, anxiety appears to be a genetic disorder. In other words, it runs in families. You'll see that it pops up, maybe with not every family member, but you'll see it pop up in many different ways. Maybe it's generalized anxiety disorder in one person. Maybe it's panic attacks in somebody else. Maybe somebody else is having OCD, but you'll see it kind of pop up in a family over and over and over through the generations. My family struggles with anxiety. It's very common in my family. What I've noticed is that anxiety is sort of like the fight or flight system glitchy. It's too sensitive. It's like, imagine you've got a faulty outlet that wants to, act like it's like the light switch wants to turn on too easily. That would be a good way to understand anxiety. It activates too readily to the anticipation of fear, the fact that it senses that something is happening and you're at risk. So when you become abused and it's already like causing your fight or flight system to stick on, and you already have this touchy system that wants to activate too easily, you can see how trauma will really overly activate and worsen OCD. It just kind of connects because they're the same system as having problems. So Brittany, I'm not surprised that you're seeing a worsening in your OCD symptoms after being narcissistically abused. That makes sense to me. The way that OCD treatment is different than trauma treatment, but similar. They're similar but different. Because OCD has compulsions and obsessions. So there's this piece that you're thinking about your head that you keep going over and over and over. I'm a little OCD, so I understand it. Mine was things need to be organized, or I feel like I can't breathe, or something bad's going to happen. It kind of manifests differently for different people. Some people have an issue with disease or germs or poison, or other people have about safety on the highway, or where they sit in a building, or not able to go anywhere. I mean, it really varies from person to person. But whenever you participate with the behavior, you're strengthening the connection, because our brain is built on pathways like the old-fashioned telephone lines. And so the more we do something, the greater the strength of the habit we're making, the connection we're making. We're wiring the brain to work that way. And the best way to distinguish a behavior is to stop doing it. And over time, the wiring and do new things, the connection made in the brain starts to extinguish because it's not necessary. Again, remember, the brain's all about survival. And one of the ways it survives is efficiency. So it doesn't want like excessive pathways it doesn't need. It's going to stop attending to them, and it's going to change if you ignore it. So one way to deal with OCD is you actually have to break the habit and build new habits that are different, which is really hard because it feels so compulsive, like something bad will happen if you don't do it. But which is, like I said, so it's different kind of treatment outcomes or protocols, but it's a very kind of similar process. So great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, you're right, Brittany. The more you fight it, the more you're strengthening it, because when you do it, when you do the behavior, you're strengthening the neural pathways and making them stronger. That's why it's getting worse. So make a plan, make a toolkit of things that you're going to do whenever you feel the urge, and then activate those things and resist it. And what I often tell people is don't resist the hardest ones. Like what I do with people when I'm working with OCD is I have them rank order all the behaviors. Say they're afraid. I had one person afraid to get a blood draw. So I would say, okay, you have to make the appointment. You have to then drive to the office. You then have to, I would break down all the steps to a blood draw, and then have them practice the parts that are easier, and then slowly work up to the harder parts. Because to go tell someone to go deal with a catastrophic level 10 sort of an emotional experience, well, it's not going to work. But you can deal with the ones and twos. So work on the ones and twos first until you gain some ground on that, and then start to work up to the harder ones. So Sorceress Song says, my husband or my man is very angry and withdrawn sort, but not the controlling abusive, but I'm healing from a narcissist. So his bad moods can be triggering. Yeah, isn't that interesting? That's back to the idea of our brain is always watching for threat. And so for you've learned bad moods may mean it's going to be a really bad time. It's going to be some kind of a meltdown. No, maybe in this relationship, Sorcerer's Song, it doesn't mean that at all. But you're used to that. So when you experience it, you then anticipate. It's as if it's happening even when it's not happening. So again, it helps to say these things out loud to make the connections, so that then you can remind yourself when the connection's being made that there is no connection, that you can say, I'm not with this person. This isn't going to happen. I'm safe. His bad mood or his upsetness just means he's upset. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not at risk here. Hey, so good to see you, Louise. And I see Breeze here too. I appreciate that. If you guys are not following, there's 3 great creators over here on TikTok. If you guys are not following, I highly recommend it. One is Super Sloth Louise. The other is Abuse Bree. And then also Thriving in the Aftermath is Brittany. And I really, really appreciate all of you and your content that you guys have. So how do you help someone who doesn't want to shower or get out of bed? Can you say more about that at Tu Brute? Why, what's going on? Why don't they? Is it anxiety, or is it just that they're depressed? It could be they're depressed and they literally don't have the energy. Because there's lots of reasons why somebody who doesn't want to, it could be they're autistic, there could be lots of reasons. And Louise is asking, do you do the same for agoraphobia as OCD to break it down? Yeah, I would. That's what I would do with, agoraphobia is for those who don't know what that means, it's a fear of, it literally means a fear of open spaces. So people who have a fear of open spaces tend to really avoid unfamiliar things. They like to avoid change. And as a result, some of them can't leave their house very easily. But there are ways in which it shows up that you don't like change. So yeah, I would do the same thing, Louise. I would make a list of the ways in which you're afraid of that, however it is. And maybe the catastrophic one is I can't leave the house. That would be your 10. But maybe what you can do is, there's little levels of it. Maybe like opening a window or making a phone call or other ways in which you kind of mentally leave the house that you can practice. So you can kind of move it up to it. And then, like I said, repetitively practice. And I want to give you guys a warning, okay? If you're doing this sort of desensitization work, which is really what I'm talking about, you have to be prepared to complete it. There's a warning here. If you say to yourself, I'm going to try this behavior, you need to do the behavior. Because if you don't, you've strengthened the fear. You've now made it worse and you've heightened it than it was before. So let's take, for instance, say you can't ride an elevator. and you worked up to getting ready to where you're going to actually get an elevator with a support person. And then you get right up to it, and then you bail out on the elevator. And by the way, I have, you're not going to believe this one. I actually have stage fright. You're like, what? You're speaking live, sometimes to lots of people, and you have stage fright? Yes, I do. It's with performing with music. It's not speaking. Isn't it weird? I can speak, but I have issues with performance with music or singing. I have a very good voice. So I actually have done that. I've bailed on performances where I'm mid-performance and I bail, and it made it so much worse. I strengthened the fear. So please don't do that. Please don't do that. Make sure that whatever you do, you can succeed at, because you don't want to heighten and worsen the situation. Yeah, just a warning there. So make sure that you keep it slow, small practice, and make sure it is something that you can actually do. But great question. I appreciate that. Now, Et tu Brute added more. It said it's a trauma depression, and taking meds, but still is, still struggling. Yeah, here's the problem. You can't make someone get better. You can't. Now, you can decide whether or not you want this person in your life or in your house. You can say, I can't watch you do this to yourself. I don't really want you, but it sounds really mean, so I'm not for sure how easily I could do that, but yeah, but you can't fix it for them. I mean, it is their life, unfortunately. I'm sorry, that's is the area that you're helpless around, is what you can and cannot do about that. Yeah. Yeah, accountability buddies is really helpful with anxiety. It really does make a big difference. It really does. Okay, any other questions for me? You guys I appreciate it here, having you guys be there. Can I give you those links after the session, Laura? Yeah, just DM me, Laura, on Instagram, and I will, remind me what links you're looking for. I'd be happy to send those links to you. Yep. Why do we want to fill our void of loneliness? Well, I think, Ethan, that's an interesting question. I'm going to give you a kind of psychological perspective. We are born, we are always in relationship. If you think about it, even in utero, you're connected by umbilical cord to your mother. And then when you're born, you're highly dependent on the care of your caregivers for your survival. We're never not in relationship. Now, we have periods of time as an adult. Sometimes we don't have a lot of outside relationships, but we're even still in a relationship with ourselves. And some would say spiritually we're in a relationship, that we're relational people. So when loneliness is kind of like partly a state of being, but also a state of life. So it could be that we have periods of aloneness where we don't have a lot of people in our life, but we can also be very lonely in relationships, because we may be looking for something the relationship's not providing. In fact, I would say the periods I have been the most lonely have been periods when I've been in a context of a relationship that wasn't meeting my needs. So I would say when I feel lonely, my first question is, what's driving the loneliness? For me, like I said, it's when I was in the relationship, it's when that person failed to sort of be as intimate as I had hoped, that a relationship really wasn't what I was expecting. And so I was feeling very, very much in pain at that period. So then the question is, how am I going to get those needs met? I need to sort of stop looking for that person to function that way for me, either leave the relationship or to change my expectations of the relationship and look for it elsewhere. But yeah, loneliness. So part of it is a state of mind and how we interpret things and how we kind of pursue our needs. I'll tell you, I'm right now not in a relationship outside of my sons and outside of you all, online. So I don't have a lot of rich outside relationships in my life. I've never been less lonely. This is probably one of my least lonely periods of my life. And it's mostly because of the way that I've been relating to myself. It's really made it change. So it's partly how we show up for ourselves, I would say, is a big way how we change to fill the void in our loneliness. So Luis is asking, how do we make Christmas more, more relaxed for a 14-year-old who's struggling with depression and trauma? Yeah, I mean, those of you who know my story know that I was widowed 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago, 7.5 years ago. So my sons and I, that's my family, my sons and I we don't have dad. They don't have dad. So Christmas for us is really different. I don't have any tree up. And we might go to a movie, or we'll watch a movie, or we'll order in, we'll do something. So I would say the way to make it really relax is to ask your 14-year-old what would make it a meaningful Christmas. And then allow yourself to be unconventional. For me, it's not, I will probably light candles in the fireplace. That will be the closest I'll get to a fire. And because I'm in Texas, so it's not that cold. And I'll probably turn on the outside lights on the patio and kind of make it look a little, festive. And we'll probably do what really makes us feel good. And it probably won't be turkey or ham. It'll probably be brisket or something like that. But to tune in and pay attention to what is meaningful and special to you, and allow yourself to break so-called societal rules, I would urge you to do. I really think that's a great way to take it back, make it your own. Yeah, great question. There's a storm in Texas today. So Brittany lives about an hour south of me. Yeah. Sandy says, I wish I didn't know the truth about relationships with narcissistic mom. It does make it hard. I agree. No, there's a part of this. Here's what I find, and I would love to know if this is true for you, Sandy, and true for others here. The more I know, it allows me more control, because then I can address it, but it also increases my sense of grief. I'm aware of the things that I am sad about, and because of the things that have been lost. Is that true for you? Roddy pup. So you have a dog with a puppy. How do you get rid of fight or flight when your child's being abused and no one helps? You are going to be in a state of flight. You can't not be in one. Yeah, because you as a parent are instinctually connected to your child, and you want safety, and you know that you can't provide the safety, and you said no one's helping, so you feel very out of control. So I would say you're in survival mode. Acknowledge you're in survival mode, and then see what you can do to sort of manage it and contain it. And I'm sorry, I hate legal abuse. Or, how abusive people use the legal system and custody rules in order to continue to be hurtful. I am so sorry that's happening to you and your family. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Yeah, you have anxiety, and there's no really easy way out, unfortunately. It is. Yeah, part of us coming to terms with our abuse and our histories is acknowledging the things that we've lost and that we are grieving. It is. One of the ones that I'm grieving lately is because of my age. I don't know if I'll have another really significant relationship in my life. I'm not for sure I really want one, for one. So there's partly my desire. But partly is that it's just, the window of time for me is kind of closing a little bit. Yeah, I can as I get older, but it won't be the same. It won't be the same as it was in my 30s and 40s. So I'm trying to become okay with that and grieve the fact that it's changing and it's going to be different, and which is really hard. I'm going to be here about 10 more minutes. Yeah, I'm with you. I never know how to say people's names. I'm 60 as well. So 60, that's how old I am. I know I don't look it, but that is how old I am. And I feel it. My body feels it. So yeah, and because I don't look my age, that some people get interested in me who are a lot younger than me, and then I end up feeling like, yeah, but I don't have the flexibility, and I don't have I deal with chronic pain, so, I will be limiting. If I get into a relationship with a much younger man, I would limit his, at least, or he would be doing more without me. That's tough. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know you're 41, Sarah. Yeah, and all of us, for those of us who've been in relationships, we've lost time. That's one of the things we have to deal with, is the grief we feel around lost time. Sly, you think I think too much? Well, you remember I just did Toronto and North Carolina and Austin with a bunch of 34-year-olds, and I watched them moving around a lot quicker than I am. And my tolerance level, my endurance level is less than theirs. I was more done faster. So it was very exhausting to do those Narc Avenger meetups. We went all day, and I didn't have it in me to do all day. Plus, I'm an introvert, so I don't want to do all day anyway, but that's funny. I love listening what you guys all say. Brittany, you're 27. You feel 40. You don't act like a young 27. You look 27, but you're an old spirit. That's what I would say. Yes, Sarah, I know you lost a lot of time. I know you did. Shala wants to know, can I please help know how to work through the anxiety of phone calls with my kid's father, who's an abusive ex-husband? So what kind of phone calls are you having to make? Is it anything that could be done through an app so you don't have to actually make the phone calls? Sometimes the situations we have to rethink it. We get trapped into thinking it can only be done in a certain way, and it really does. It can be done in lots of different ways. No one says you always have to make a phone call. So that's be my first question is that the only route this can be addressed with? And just because your narcissistic ex or your abusive ex says that's all that they'll take doesn't mean you have to participate with that. You have control and you can say no. Oh, Mandy said, I left him 5 days ago and I'm really struggling to understand. Well, I missed your earlier comment, Mandy. What are you struggling to understand? Can you say more about that? Oh, and happy birthday delayed to you, Sarah. Yeah, you just turned 41 a couple of days ago. Welcome to the 40s. To me, I felt like I liked the 40s a lot. I thought 40s were great years. 50s to me were really good too. I'm trying to adapt to the 60 idea. Laura, I do clarity calls. I don't do counseling these days. I offer a one-time clarity call to help give direction, give pointers, talk about resources, maybe figure out what you need next. You know, if that's something you'd benefit for, that's a link in my bio for that. I have coaches that I really like that I have a great deal of trust in. So I'd be able to make referrals to you to some coaches that might be effective for your situation. So anybody who's looking for that, it's called a clarity call and the link is in my bio. But I don't do ongoing counseling these days for lots of reasons. It's quite complicated. This online setting does not really, the way the United States licensed psychologist doesn't really encourage online counseling. I mean, yes, we can, but there's rules around residency and you know, all of this. So yeah, that's why I don't counsel these days. And I'm not into coaching. I don't want to do that. I'm kind of burnt out on it, but I love doing clarity calls. So if you are interested in that, you can find a link in my bio and there's a limited time in December, but there's more time in January. So I look younger than you. Yeah, I got lucky. You know, if you saw my earlier pictures, I've aged well. I don't know why. It's weird. So, yeah, by the way, thank you, Brittany, for reminding me. So for those of you who are in the throes of leaving a narcissist right now or want to leave and you don't know how to or don't know if you should or don't know what's going on, I have a great resource called First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist. It's a course and a workbook designed just for where you're at. It was what I needed when I was in the throes of that, when I was just like caught and couldn't figure out what was up, what was down, couldn't figure out what was real, what was true. And then I felt so guilty and like I was like betraying myself, trying to make a move to protect myself. So if that defines you, then First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist is just what you're looking for. There's a course. It's about 7 hours long, just about the right amount of time. You can do it on your mobile device, so nobody needs to know that you're doing it. You can wear headphones and listen to the video. I give you advice about how to keep it private. And then the workbook in the link in my bio is digital. You actually can fill it out in your mobile phone so no one needs to ever see it. So it can be private just for you, so it keeps you safe. Keeps you safe. Yeah, Mandy, the reason he's doing that is because narcissistic people, I'm going to wrap up on this and then I'll be back, guys, on Thursday. But narcissistic individuals have a fragile ego. They're not very regulated, believe it or not. They struggle with impulse control and judgment, and they feel shaky and insecure. And what they do is they lean into relationships. That's why we call supply. You supply the support and help shore them up. So they don't want you, they need to be in control. So they'll do whatever they want to do impulsively to do what they do. But the minute they think they might lose you, they then leap back out and try to hook you back in because they rely on you almost like a stabilizer, you know, like a foundation, like you're like the column who holds them up. They don't want to lose you because they don't want to lose that support. So yes, watch out for that, guys. This is the holidays. That destabilizes a lot of shaky people, and you're at risk of being hoovered. So be really, really careful about that. Really careful. And did I see your comment? No, I didn't. I'm going to see if I can see it, but would you start to write it again so I can find it if I don't have to go back too far? And that will be the last comment that I'll take today. And I will be back at 1 o'clock on Thursday. Normally, I jump over to YouTube and watch the last time with you, but because I haven't been live in over a week because I've been traveling, there isn't anything over on YouTube today, so I won't be jumping over there. No, I don't see your comment. I've gone back like 100 comments on Instagram and I don't see it. So can you put it back there again for me? I'm talking to Merv PKR. She said, did you see my comment with her prayer hands? If you can write your comment in. I'm glad Emery Zozen 81, this is helpful. I'm glad that's been helpful. Oh, and I'm glad, Janet, that's been useful too. Yeah. My vacation, like I said, my vacation was to Mexico. I took my 3 sons, and it was business. The reason we did it was business. It was a real quick trip in and a quick trip out. But the weather was fantastic. The Caribbean is a balmy 80 degrees for those of you who know temperatures in Fahrenheit. That would be 30 degrees Celsius for those of you in the rest of the world. So it was really, really nice. Like I said, we stayed at the condo that he and I had built. That part was hard. But we hung out at the beach and we ate good food. And my sons and I, interestingly enough, since we lost my husband, we've slowly learned how to come back together and we've become each other's best friends. So we love to hang out together. We have kind of like, I would say, yes, I'm mom, but I'm also really, in a lot of ways, I'm just more friend than mom. And we're each other's best friends. So it was really wonderful. I have 3 boys. I don't know if you guys know that. Their ages are 30, boys. They're not boys. They're 31, 29, and 25, 26 years old. So they're young men. They're 3 young men. No women in our lives outside of outside of me. They're not dating anyone, but they're amazing young men, very successful, and I'm happy. Yeah, I'm still watching for your comment over there, Merv. I'm still here. But it was a good trip, and I'm going back, and this is what I'm excited about. I'm going back in January, and I will be going with Ro. Roller Coaster of Love and I are going to go with her mom. We're going to make a trip, and I'm sure you'll see us do lives together and do some content together. So I'm excited about that trip. It's going to be a good trip. Yeah. Hey, you guys, I so appreciate you very, very, very much, and I'll be back on Thursday at 1. And until then, I'll take it easy, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.